In the last part, we finished off the video by setting up the Battle of Leyte Gulf, but I feel that it is important to repeat myself to give you guys a better picture of the situation. Now, in the invasion of Leyte, the United States had sent the largest naval force ever assembled. The Americans brought the large Third Fleet under Admiral Halsey with his fast battleships and fleet carriers, while there was also the Seventh Fleet under Admiral Thomas Kinkaid, who had the older battleships, escort carriers, and amphibious forces used in the invasion of Leyte. Halsey was ordered to cover and support the invasion of Leyte, and to destroy enemy naval and air forces that threatened the Philippine area, and critically, Halsey would amend his orders to be, quote, in case of opportunity for destruction of major portions of the enemy fleet is offered or can be created, such destruction becomes the primary task, end quote. This will become critical for understanding the Battle of Leyte Gulf. On the 20th of October, Halsey would lead preparatory airstrikes against the Philippines, where over 160,000 army troops would land on Leyte. Now, to set up the Japanese perspective for the Battle of Leyte, the Japanese would have several plans for a decisive battle, choosing Hatsu Ichigo, or translated to English as Victory 1 Operation, which would use Admiral Ozawa's carriers who had few trained pilots to bait Halsey and the Third Fleet away from Leyte Gulf, while Japan would use its still potent surface forces in a two-pronged pincer attack, with Admiral Takeo Kurita heading through San Bernardino Strait, and Admiral Shoji Nishimura would head through the Surigao Strait into Leyte Gulf to destroy the American amphibious ships there. The Japanese would commit a vast majority of their surface fleet, including its most modern battleships, the Yamato and her sister ship the Musashi. The resulting Battle of Leyte Gulf would be the largest battle ever fought at sea, involving around 200,000 sailors and airmen, about 1,000 aircraft, and nearly 300 major warships, along with numerous other ships. All the while during this action, the most powerful American surface forces were nowhere near the area of Leyte Gulf, as aboard the New Jersey was Admiral Halsey, who was making some of the most difficult, hard-pressed, and very much debated decisions of the Second World War. Moving on swiftly, the Battle of Leyte Gulf would kick off on October 23, 1944, when American submarines would spot the main Japanese surface force heading towards the Philippines. Reporting this sighting and sinking two cruisers in the process, these submarines would provide an advanced warning for Admiral Halsey aboard the New Jersey, who on the 24th had scout planes in the air, and through them the American forces would spot Kurita's fleet, Halsey telling the carrier groups to strike this fleet, whilst the New Jersey would guard the carrier forces as they would launch their raids that would sink the Musashi and damage other ships in the Sibuyan Sea. Japanese air attacks would strike in return, sinking the light carrier Princeton, and Admiral Ozawa would launch a weak strike in an attempt to get the attention of Halsey. But to the Americans, it would just seem like another land-based strike. With Kurita still heading towards the San Bernardino Strait, Halsey at 3:12 would send a message to his subordinates for the New Jersey and three other fast battleships, which were the Iowa, Washington, and Alabama, along with 5 cruisers and quite a few destroyers, to be formed into a task force under Admiral Willis Lee, the fast battleship commander. Due to some confusion on the radio, Admirals Kinkaid and Nimitz were under the impression that Task Force 34 was being formed and left to guard the San Bernardino Strait, to which Halsey would send a clarifying message, which essentially said that the task force will be formed when he directs it. But this was said on the TBS, or Talk Between Ships radio, so Nimitz and Kinkaid were both unaware that Task Force 34 had not yet been formed and sent to guard the strait. A bit of confusion that could and would have dire consequences. Early in the afternoon on the 24th, Halsey's staff aboard the New Jersey knew where Kurita's center force was and knew where Nishimura's southern force was, but they still did not know where Admiral Ozawa's carrier force was. Eventually, around 4:40, the carriers were spotted. In the meantime, Kurita would maneuver in the Sibuyan Sea, turning away for a time from the San Bernardino Strait in a feint, but he would resume his course towards the strait at 5:14 p.m. Later that evening, after spotting Kurita's force once more, Halsey would have to make a decision. He knew Admiral Kinkaid was preparing to confront Nishimura's force at Surigao Strait, with Admiral Jesse Oldendorf's older battleships. Halsey would have to decide if the entire Third Fleet should guard San Bernardino Strait, or just Task Force 34 under Admiral Lee, while the carrier struck Ozawa's force. Or the third option, should the entire Third Fleet go after Ozawa's carrier force? Well, as many of you know who have studied the battle, Halsey would take the entire Third Fleet after Ozawa's carrier forces. In all, 9 fleet carriers, 7 light carriers, 6 fast battleships, 16 cruisers, and 27 destroyers would begin the run northward to strike Ozawa's carriers, leaving not a single ship to guard the San Bernardino Strait. At 8:22 p.m., Halsey would send a radio telegram from New Jersey to Nimitz and Kinkaid, which reads as follows: proceeding north with 3 groups to attack carrier force at dawn. Again, confusion would reign supreme here, as Nimitz and Kinkaid would believe that this only referred to Halsey's 3 carrier task groups, and not Task Force 34, which they assumed was still lying in wait guarding San Bernardino Strait. But their assumption was wrong, as New Jersey and the other elements of Task Force 34 were steaming north with the three carrier task groups, and at 2:40 a.m. on the 25th, Halsey would in fact order Task Force 34 to form. However, not to return to San Bernardino Strait, but to steam north ahead of the carriers to show Ozawa's force, or at least what ships would survive the airstrike. Now, there were subordinates who were concerned leaving the strait completely unguarded, one of which was Admiral Lee, who, by blinker signal, sent a message to New Jersey that he believed that Kurida's force would attempt to force its way through the strait, but all he would receive in return was Roger. Drawing from Battleship Commander by Paul Stillwell, Lee and the other subordinates were not exactly comfortable challenging Halsey's decision, with Admiral Mitchell saying, "If Halsey wants my advice, he'll ask for it." Even some of Halsey's staff would have their concerns about the decision, but did not want to wake the exhausted Halsey in his cabin. With Kurida's force going unchallenged into the San Bernardino Strait, the same could not be said about Admiral Nishimura's force heading towards the Surigao Strait, as between a combination of PT boat and destroyer attacks, along with accurate gunfire from the old battle wagons, some of them being Pearl Harbor survivors, with this deadly combo of torpedoes and cruiser and battleship fire, Nishimura's two battleships, heavy cruiser, and 3 out of his 4 destroyers were utterly destroyed, while Kurida's center force went through the San Bernardino Strait unchallenged, sailing around the island of Samar in the direction of the transports in Leyte Gulf, while the two American battle fleets were far off to the north and south, with the only thing standing between Kurida's powerful force and those transports being Admiral Sprague's Taffy 3, consisting of 3 destroyers, 4 destroyer escorts, and 6 escort carriers. The actions of the battle off Samar is something we will discuss another time, or please do go check out my video on the USS Johnston. I'll try to remember to put the link in the description. At 4:12 a.m., Admiral Kincaid would send a message to Halsey, asking if Task Force 34 was guarding San Bernardino Strait. Because the message would have to go the roundabout way, through General MacArthur's headquarters and then to New Jersey and then decoded, it wasn't received until 6:48 a.m., where Halsey would respond at 7:05 on the 25th, saying that, quote, "Negative, TF-34 with our carriers, now engaging enemy carriers," end quote. This wouldn't reach Kincaid until 2 hours later. At 7 a.m., Admiral Sprague, leading Taffy 3, would spot Kurida's force, and at 7:07, Kincaid would send another message, this time uncoded, to Halsey, saying, "Enemy battleships and cruisers reported firing on Taffy 3. Halsey would read this message at 8:22, and so deciding to send Task Force 34 north to strike Ozawa's carriers, and to send McCain's distant carrier group to launch long-range airstrikes in support of Taffy 3. At 9:27, Halsey would respond to Kincaid's previous message, saying, "I am still engaging enemy carriers." Then Kincaid, in another encoded message, at 10 a.m. to Halsey aboard New Jersey, quote, "Where is Lee? Send Lee," end quote. With Admiral Chester Nimitz monitoring the situation from Pearl Harbor, eventually Nimitz's staff would send the message at 9:44, quote, "Turkey trots to water, GG, where is Task Force 34, RR, the world wonders." It is important to note that the 25th of October happened to be the anniversary of the charge of the Light Brigade from the Crimean War, and in the popular poem by Alfred Tennyson, it has the phrase, quote, "Charging an army while all the world wonders," end quote. Now, the phrase, "the world wonders," was just part of the encoding, but the decoder aboard New Jersey thought it was part of the message, and so it was given to Admiral Halsey, and being a student of history with quite the temper, took offense, believing that Nimitz was questioning his judgment, throwing his hat to the ground in a fit of rage. He would have to be brought to his cabin to cool off for an hour. Meanwhile, his force continued northwards towards Ozawa's force, and away from Taffy 3, who desperately needed help. Halsey's airstrikes against the Japanese carriers were successful, sinking the Zuikaku, 2 light carriers, a destroyer, and crippling another light carrier and a light cruiser. At 10:55, Halsey, after finally responding to Nimitz, ordered New Jersey to lead Task Force 34 and Admiral Bogan's carrier group to aid Taffy 3. New Jersey and 5 other battleships would head south, and because of some of the limited speed of the other battleships, they would not get there until 13 hours later. Other elements of the Third Fleet would continue to head north, with American cruisers sinking the crippled light carrier along with another destroyer, as well as a submarine sinking another light cruiser, but could not prevent the damaged battleships or battle carriers at this point, Issei or Hyuga, a cruiser and 4 destroyers from escaping. Through the morning and into the afternoon, Admiral Sprague's force would fight off the advance of Admiral Kurida's force, and at 12:36, Kurita would abandon his charge into Leyte anchorage and headed back into the San Bernardino Strait. At 5:01, Halsey would order New Jersey, Iowa, 3 light cruisers, and 8 destroyers to race ahead to catch up with Kurita's force, to force a night action. But Task Force 34 would not reach the strait in time to catch up. But they would catch the Japanese destroyer Noakai, which has stayed behind to rescue survivors, sinking her at 1 a.m. on the 26th, which would put an end to the run of Admiral Halsey to the south in an attempt to catch up with Admiral Kurita. Now, in discussing the Battle of Leyte Gulf, there's always the big what if. What if Admiral Halsey had left Task Force 34 to guard San Bernardino Strait with the New Jersey, Iowa, and the other American battleships against the Yamato and the other Japanese battleships? With the Yamato's 9 18.1-inch guns being able to fire a 3,219-pound shell over 25 miles, while the Americans' 2,700-pound shell would go almost 24 miles, it certainly would have been an interesting brawl. But with the American battleships being faster, with better handling, a more stable gun platform, and a better rate of fire, not to mention being able to fire more accurately, it would have been close, but I think I know where I would have put my money. But we will never know definitively what would happen, as Admiral Halsey took New Jersey and the rest of Task Force 34 north with him to strike Ozawa's carriers. This decision and others Halsey made during the battle has caused quite the controversy then and now. I will not be commenting on those, as I don't feel qualified to make a definitive statement, but I would love to hear all of yours down in the comments, and maybe if you poke and prod me, I might just respond and tell you my thoughts. Even with these questionable decisions, the Battle of Leyte Gulf was an unequivocal victory for the United States, being one of the most decisive victories at sea in World War II. The Japanese would lose a fleet carrier, 3 light carriers, 3 battleships, 6 heavy cruisers, 4 light cruisers, and 9 destroyers. In the air, they would lose about 300 planes, while the Americans would lose a light carrier, 2 escort carriers, 2 destroyers, a destroyer escort, a PT boat, and around 200 planes. This spelled the doom for the Imperial Japanese Navy as an effective fighting force, as they had lost nearly everything in this gambit. There would not be another large pitched battle at sea between the Japanese and United States for the remainder of the Second World War. This victory would pave the way for the liberation of the Philippines from Japanese occupation, and would lead to further invasions and the eventual Allied victory in the Pacific. Which is something we will have to come to at another point. As this video is coming to a close, the Battle of Leyte Gulf will certainly have to be its own video at some point in the future, but I'm thinking about making another video like I made for the Battle of the Coral Sea back in September. That video was a lot of fun to make, and it's kind of good to get a change of pace from the other videos on the channel. So please do let me know if you'd like me to post more videos on battles, as at the time of writing this, I am reading Dark Seas, which is about the Battle of Cape Matapan. But I'm rambling. Thank you all for watching, and until next time, my friends, good luck this week.